very much indeed. And the word love has already been mentioned in German. We're going to use the word love in English, and I'd like to extend love to Walter Gront as well, for all he does for European literature and for this festival. Because that's what it's about. This title, How Do We Love in Unsettling Times? And we're doing this in English, and as with this whole festival, everybody here speaks different languages. It's really wonderful. We're doing it in English, but my guests are from Norway and Belgium. That shows how brilliant they are, that they're going to do the event in English, but it also shows how we're mixing up the languages, because that's being European for all of us. So welcome, first of all, to Annelies Verbeke, who's on the far left there, not politically, just she happens to be sitting there, from Belgium. And also to Ida Hegazi Høyer, who's from Norway and is here in the middle. So we're going to look after her. Now, we're going to talk specifically about two novels. One is called 30 Days, and the other is called Trost. And I'm saying it in German because it's not yet out in English, so it's 30 Tage und Trost. And we're trying to decide how we would best translate Trost, solace, consolation, consoling, comfort. It's a very difficult word, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
In English.
Yeah.
But positive, I hope. So these two books are ultimately about love and the difficulty of love. They're about the driving force of love and sex and passion and pleasure. And in the context of this session, it's really, you know, what do they achieve? Is that enough for a good life? It's also about the drive of philanthropy and charity and goodness and our search for empathy. And in the end, I suppose we want to ask, you know, is it always ultimately destroyed? Is love, however hard we try, is it impossible? So we're going to talk about each novel, as I say, and I want to start off by talking to Ida about Trost, and Ida's going to read to us as well in English. Now this is really three linked stories. It's one woman, an unnamed woman, who travels across Europe looking for solace, looking for love, looking for Trost.
Looking for something.
Looking for something.
Yes.
Tell us about her and what it is she's looking for.
Well, first I'd like to say that in Norway it was actually published as 3 stories, as a collection of 3 short stories, although they're quite long. And here in Germany it's published as a novel. And a lot of people in Norway, they read it as a novel. So it's not actually explicitly said that it is the same woman, but obviously a lot of people read it as being that. So it's up to the reader whether you can read it as you like. But it's this one woman, yes, traveling through Europe. We don't really know a lot about her. She, in each story, takes place in a different city. Sorry. And the first one is in Lisbon, and the second one is in Berlin. And in the third novel, the third story, she's in Brussels, Belgium. And in each city, she enters an affair quite rapidly with some unknown person who we also don't know anything about. And so it's, she is obviously seeking some sort of belonging. And I chose to put her in a different city without any belonging, because when you are new in a different place or a place where nobody knows who you are, you can actually be anyone, right? So I believe it can also make you do different things, perhaps be braver or think different thoughts, do different actions than what you possibly would do back at home. So
the amazing thing about the fact that everybody's strangers in this novel, and it would definitely be published as a novel in Britain, three linked stories. Anything goes now. it's all novels. But these basically it demonstrates how total strangers can fall in love, which in itself is an extraordinary fact.
It is. It is.
I mean, what are your conclusions about that? How is it possible?
Oh, I don't know if I have any conclusions, but, I believe that if you are estranged enough, you will find closeness anywhere, because we need it. So it's not a very romantic enter to this topic. But I also think that it's a very beautiful thing that you can meet someone in spite of all these cultural differences, in spite of language barriers. These people, they don't talk the same languages, and in spite of political differences, religion, they still meet through their bodies, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
And it's the ultimate goal, if you like, in unsettling times.
I guess.
You know, to feel love and comfort and at home.
At home.
Because that's what love is too.
Yes, I think so. And these people are quite. They are alone, and we don't really know a lot about them. Some aspects do come through the text, but they are damaged people, and they just seek to have something to cling to.
And before we hear your reading, let's talk about love in your book, Annelies, which I have been able to read because it is splendidly also published in English. And as you know, things take much longer to be published in English. I apologize for that. I always apologize every time I come. We read only about 5% of literary fiction is from other countries. So, and in Germany, German-speaking countries, it's about 50%. So you know much more about foreign writers than we do, sadly. But I'm delighted to say that 30 Days was published in English, and has just been published in German too, which is great. So this book, which I do know well, is also a love story. There are two characters, Alphonse and Kat. They're the lovers. They're very happy. They're very beautiful young people.
Yeah, well, in the first place, I wanted to write a book about goodness, actually, what it is to... I always start with an abstract philosophical theme, and I wanted to write about what it is to be a good person, and I wanted to write about it in a non-moralistic way. But it's true also, the love between Alphonse and his girlfriend Kat is quite important, and it was funny to see, I talked a lot about 30 dagen, it is called, my book in Dutch. And I talked a lot about it in reading groups and stuff. And the love theme was dividing people the most, I found. And this is, of course, because we all expect different things from love, I think. Because some saw their love as very problematic. I myself do not, in fact. I didn't want to make it too easy for my main character, for Alphonse, because I think when everything is all right in your life, it's quite easy to be a good person. So I wanted to have some, difficulties there. But I think Kat and Alphonse are doing fine, actually. I mean, one day is better than the other, but I wanted to have a realistic view on love and being in a long-time relationship and how this is. And sometimes it can seem catastrophical, and the next day you think, well, let's just go on, and it's quite all right.
Yeah. I think that's the reality. You just keep on going.
Yeah.
And they keep on hoping.
Yeah, and they do love each other, and I think there are some moments in the book where this is clear that the fundamentals are all right. Yeah.
Before we reveal all the details about 30 Days and so on, let's hear a reading from Ida first of all, and we'll hear it. It's a really wonderful passage, and it's about the unnamed woman in which European city is she in?
Brussels.
She's in Brussels, center of the universe. I have to say that.
I live very close.
You live very close. And so this is the woman, and she's with her Belgian lover.
Younger man. Yes. She watches him from her balcony, him and his friends, where they go, where they stand, whom they greet and whom they ignore. There is a kind of fraternity in the street. All the ones who are or believe themselves to be part of this fraternity have the same manner of saying hello, and all the ones who say hello are like him, like brothers, street brothers at least. She's not sure how or maybe even why, but she has gone from being une copine to la copine. Even though she has let him into her apartment, into her bedroom, and into her kitchen, she still doesn't entirely understand how this has happened, that she has become his new girlfriend. Can it really be so simple? She wonders. She doesn't know much about group living, isn't used to living so close to other people or to having an outlook onto their personal lives. But then, what is actually personal when all is said and done? What single aspect is more personal than anything else? Skin? Thoughts? Tears? This is now routine. It doesn't take much repetition for something to become a routine. He comes upstairs and takes hold of her. He's sorry he's late. There's been so much to do, today as any other day. He strides into the living room, places a bottle on the table, takes off his jacket and removes his shoes. Come here, he says. Sit here. And this is also a routine. She sits down on the couch. He lies on her lap and looks up at her. She puts her hand on his forehead. Usually, he's the first one to speak. Today, in a slightly huskier voice. Ma petite chérie, are you lonely?
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's very clear that you're also investigating how cities, how places impact on relationships and human lives. And I mean, you base your novel, 3 stories, in the city, and you're in the countryside with your book in 30 days. And I wonder what it is about the city that attracted you to exploring love, passion, relationships, identity.
Well, it's a melting pot, right, between at least cities in nowadays, because it consists of so many different people. People are moving all the time. It's not like before. So it contains a lot of stories. And when you are completely new in this city, you are also totally anonymous. As I said before, you can be anyone. So it's a certain freedom that consists in a city that doesn't. It's not there when you move to the countryside.
Is it more challenging? Is it more challenging to be in a city?
I don't know. I think it has its challenges, and I think it's both. It's beneficial and it's harder as well. But if you come to the countryside, then everyone will notice that, oh, you're the new one.
Which is what you've got in this novel.
This was my purpose. Actually, my main character left Brussels and his career as a musician there, and he now has a little firm, one-man firm, painting houses and decorating stuff, and and he likes it there. His wife hates it there, and it's in the west of Flanders, and I wanted to do it for this reason, because he is black, something actually the reader only finds out after 30 pages, and in the west of Flanders, in the countryside, you really stand out being black. But I wanted to, in the first place, it's also about racism, the book, but I wanted to say something also about something else about the outsider than what I had said before. I also wanted to state that sometimes people also welcome the outsider, at least initially, because they like somebody to talk to who is not part of their lives. And he comes in their natural habitat, and there he hears all the secrets and problems. And
Yes, and I mean, Alphonse, let's sort of move into talking a little bit about your book and having a reading as well, because Alphonse, he is a wonderful character. He's a good person. And, I love this idea that you felt strong enough and bold enough, courageous enough to write a novel about a good person. It's actually really difficult because, these days, you're not meant to, I don't think.
Yeah, and I really wanted to do it because there are so little examples in literature. Good people often are idiots, or they are, well, they turn out not to be so good, so they are dishonest, or well, there's always something wrong with being good. Yes. And on the other hand, I think at least during 30 days of your life, you can be, I mean, somebody who's good for others and who's quite happy in his life. But then I noticed that the tension comes from outside, and it's in real life like that as well, I think. When you think, well, I actually feel quite okay, and let's do something for other people. I mean, life is not that kind. Something will happen from the outside, and
out of the blue,
when it does not come from you,
and it changes you fundamentally.
Yeah.
And but I do think it's very brave to write about a good person. Again, back to this idea of Alphonse, because Alphonse he's about 40, coming up to 40. He has a wonderful, loving relationship with a beautiful girlfriend, wife, and he himself is a very beautiful man. And it's oh my goodness, you just feel good reading about him, and everybody likes to talk to him. He likes to give people advice in his business, in his decorating and painting business, and people come to him and they ask him for life advice as well. But you do mention that he is black, and it's almost, do you feel it's not possible to write a novel about a person of color who doesn't lead a happy life? Does racism have to come into this story?
Yeah, well, those are two different things for me, but I also wanted, during the time I was writing the book, wanted to write about racism and ways of looking at people who look different than you. I am now more than 10 years together with my man, who is from Senegal, and well, it opened my eyes completely to to racism. I had no idea it was like that, actually, and also, I mean, unintentional racism as well, and even in myself, some assumptions that I had, or yeah. So yeah, this, I mean, every book, it's never strictly autobiographical, but it always comes from your life in some way. It is what you are thinking about. So this is the reason why my main character is black. I also was a bit nervous about that, because there is the issue of cultural appropriation. Can you do this as a white person? And,
do you know, it didn't occur to me once when I was reading it that you shouldn't be writing about this because you were a white woman. You know, I've had this debate so many times about cultural appropriation. It's a very, very difficult territory.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and you should be cautious about doing that. And I asked my man many questions. Can I do this? What do you think about this? And I needed some approval from him, I think, although Alphonse is not him at all, but of course I cannot ask approval everywhere, and I was quite happy that, well, some colleagues of color liked it, so this is nice. But on the other hand, well, it matters and it doesn't matter that he is black, and I also didn't want to stress it. I mean, I wanted the reader to find out when, well, most people said around 30 pages into the book they found out. And, well, white people told me that they got confronted by this. Oh, I am in the head now of somebody who's black. Do I have to look differently at this? Why do I ask myself this question? Stuff like that. And this is interesting to do with readers, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, let's hear a passage, because the novel is made up of some wonderful stories, very sort of almost like comic vignettes in many cases. There are many, many individual stories like yours sort of in this one novel. And there's also in this a novel within a novel almost too. So there's a lot happening in here. And there's this one story about the warring neighbors. And Alphonse is in the middle of it. So.
Yeah, well, it's quite in the beginning of the story when we meet his first customers together with him, it's immediately clear that when he mentions that he's also visiting their neighbors that night, that something is not quite right between both neighboring pairs.
I was just going to say, it's great that Alphonse is a decorator, because it means he can go from house to house.
Yeah, and he comes in their intimate...
It's a great device.
Yeah.
It really is. I must remember that one.
And yeah, the book has different tones, and this is quite theatrical, I think. He's visiting Els and Dieter. Between him and the couple, bubbles tinkle in the glass of tonic they've put on the coffee table for him. At his feet pants a small, attentive dog of an indeterminate breed. When Alphonse picks up the glass and puts it to his mouth, the animal seems to hold its breath. "Where are you from?" the woman wants to know. "From Brussels," he says. "I've been living here for almost 9 months now." "Yes, yes," the woman enunciates, "but where are you really from?" "From Brussels," he said, didn't he? Her husband stands up nervously. "Would you like an olive, mister?" He asks. "Cheese?" "No, thank you, and just call me Alphonse." "We are Sieglinde and Ronnie." "I'll go and get something anyway," says the woman after her husband has sat down again. She goes to the kitchen, which is walled off from the living room. It sounds as if she's emptying all the cupboards. She said a bit more about it than that, I bet. Her story is that we killed their cat. Yes, and the reason why is even more interesting. We killed it because our own cat was run over, and because we think they did it. We incidentally don't ask ourselves who was responsible. We assume it was an accident. And that's why we, eye for an eye, cat for a cat, killed their pet, get this, by impaling it with a dart from a blowpipe. We shot a poisoned dart at it, because that's what we are like, Alphonse. That's the kind of thing we get up to, Alphonse, says Ronnie. That's what I said. For the bedroom ceilings, he recommends Balanced Mood from the Colores del Mundo collection. They agree that the pale bluish green he slides out of the color swatch will do perfectly.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant. Now, again, there's so much, and what I love is the comedy as well, too, that you dare to be funny. It's another thing, you dare to write about a really, really good human being, and you dare to be funny as well. Did you enjoy writing as almost like a comic novel in many ways?
Yeah, but I always tend to do that, although I don't think humor should be like compulsory. I mean, and I also like reading stuff that is not humorous, but for me it comes quite naturally. I think also in daily life it is my tone. It is a way to survive also.
Because you write novels and plays and short stories and... Yeah, and you're writing novels. Have you written? I mean, these are novellas, basically, short stories, I suppose, within the novel. Have you written mainly novels, isn't it?
7.
Yeah, 7 novels, right. We're very bad at catching up with the English. But so to get on to the broader themes, that sort of disintegrates in a way. We're not going to give anything away about the end of any novels. It's never a good idea. But Alphonse becomes involved with a refugee camp. And in this refugee camp, there are Afghan refugees, and then Syrians. And he stands out then because he's the only black guy there, he stands out even more. So becomes an outsider even more. And this is a really difficult issue, isn't it, to make that switch in the novel and to look at these very deep issues which are of our time, which is what you're both looking at, really. You're looking at, now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is also the area where it takes place, Westhoek it is called. It is actually the most western part of Flanders, most eastern part in the north in French. Yes, and over the French border. It is actually an area with a border in between. But then on the French side of the border, there are many of those improvised refugee camps. And because I was in the area quite a lot writing about it for other reasons, I visited a couple of those camps and well, volunteered there for a couple of days to be able to write about it. And it will always stick to me, to my mind, how it was there, and I had to do something with that because, yes, also talking about this area, it is an area where every time the whole world seems to come together because of war. It's the area where, I mean, so many dead soldiers of the First World War and also Second, but especially First World War are. And then I visited those camps, and most of them were young men. And one of those camps that I also used in the novel was like in a ditch between two fields. And when I got there, I thought, oh my God, this is like the trenches in the First World War, and they live like in similar conditions, and they are here. Those were all Afghans. They are here because of war. And how strange that this very remote area of Belgium always seems to attract young men in miserable conditions. It is strange from everywhere around the world.
Absolutely. And again, what you have in common is this search for, these are people on the move all the time. Your character's on the move all the time. I mean, 30 years ago, fall of the Berlin Wall, there we were, and I started off at the BBC then in 1989 at the Berlin Wall and witnessed everybody on the move. Barbed wire, refugees everywhere, thousands and thousands of people crossing borders, and this is all happening again. People are on the move. They have been for the last 30 years. It hasn't stopped. So what is happening in your novel? You're also reflecting that movement, the constant movement of people to try to find a home, to find love, to find somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it inflicts the time, right? Because when you're always on the move, you don't have a lot of time to really, you don't settle down, you don't have time to make a relationship work. Well, we're all carriers of love, and I think...
and we all want it. And we all have a right to it, if you like.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if we have a right to it. It's a good thought, though. But we need it in any case. And I think that we also need to receive it, but we also need to give it. We have all this caring that we need to put out somewhere. And if you don't have anyone special to give it to, you find someone random, right? And
you have sex with them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of sex in both your novels. Again, it's something which I would be, I find it very difficult to write about. If I were writing novels, I'm not. But did you find that difficult to write about sex?
Not really.
Good.
Not really. It was, it's very, in this book, it's not romantic at all. It's just very pragmatic, I suppose is the right word. It's an act of need, an act of, I guess, in some cases, desperation. And it's just human. It's just
is
you know,
that
you
is
have
sex
your morning coffee.
Have sex, sex and coffee. But does that? There are children here, young people. Is that a precursor to looking for love?
I'm sorry.
Is that if you like, a preamble to trying to find love?
Or maybe it's a substitute for love, perhaps. And also, of course, as for many people, it starts with sex. Yeah, I think there's not a lot of people left who wait until marriage, right? So we start at the other end, and we find out if it works or not, and then we can have a conversation, maybe.
Is your woman, is she looking for happiness in her travels as she moves around?
I'm not sure if she's looking for happiness. Maybe, but she's looking for, I think, just some peace and quiet and some trost, if you will, and a belonging, perhaps, even if it's only for, if it's not permanent, just a feeling of belonging somewhere for a short time. And they're all, they have this feeling that I think a lot of people have these days, that our world is broken, right? And it's at a state of disaster. And so love, or the ideal idea of love, you know, starting a family, the thought of maybe even bringing kids into this world is hard, or at least problematic. It's sort of like in the shadow of that disastrous state that these people are sort of, you know, they're suffering from lack of meaning.
And she is, by contrast with Alphonse, who is trying to create, in a way, trying to create a better world, a good life for other people. I mean, he's really trying hard to be a good person, not just for himself, but for other people. Mm. Whereas your woman is...
She's just trying to
exist. She's doing it for herself. She's doing it for herself. Mm. And I wonder, you know, on this question of, you know, what is a good life, how to find a good life, how did you picture that with Alphonse? Did you see him as being a philanthropist, somebody who really tries to create a better life for himself, but also for others? And as somebody from Senegal, aware of, you know, immigration, mass migration.
Yeah, well, he's actually the third Jesus figure, you could say, in my work. And I wonder whether I am finally rid of Jesus now, because yes, I think I have some kind of mild savior complex myself. So yes, I always think, yeah, let's do good things for each other, and then the world thinks differently, and I get sad. Yeah, and Alphonse is a bit like that. I mean, they are all me, of course, the characters. But I think he is, of the different Jesus figures that were in my work, he's the most realistic, because he is not doing big things. It's just, he's not trying to save the world. I have a novel which is also translated in German, Fische retten, and there the main character really wants to save the world. She thinks she has to do this personally. Alphonse is not delusional like that. He just, what comes on his way and where he can help, he does. And what he does mostly is listening to people, actually. It's not so spectacular what he does, after all. Yeah.
And I recall the novel where I first met you, Forgive Me, which was a few years ago, that won the European Union Prize for Literature. I mean, that was about a couple who had this idealistic view of love. And it was very sort of couple focus, small focus. And that it went wrong.
Horribly wrong.
Horribly wrong.
Yes.
Does it always go wrong? This search for love and ideal life?
If it doesn't go wrong, it doesn't become a love story, right? I hope not. I don't think it always goes wrong. I mean, there are examples of people staying together. Well, staying together is one thing, being happy is another. But I do think it exists, but I think it's hard to find, and it's maybe harder now that we don't really need to stay together. I mean, leaving is an option. It wasn't before, to the same degree. And I also think that well, why I write about this is it's not. I guess it's not to write about love, but to write. It's like an investigation of identity, I presume, and. When you are in a relationship, you sort of think that you know the other person. After several years, at least, you think that you know each other very well. But in the end, no matter how long you stay together, you don't know everything about someone. And there is always some black hole in you that you don't reveal, that you don't show to even your closest person. And for some people, that black hole is not so small. For some, it's huge. And it's really scary and also quite fascinating that, you know, what we tell and what we don't. And it's a lot of power to it as well.
If we look at the basic theme of this whole festival, which is, you know, what is a good life, and I was thinking about what Walter Grant was saying too, that, you know, most of what we read these days and our lives are dominated by dystopias and not utopias, and climate change and mass migration and our search for success and money and the dominance of technology and digital lives, a kind of AI. This is our reality. And does it mean that we as literary folk, writers, artists, have to try in some way to find the blueprints for a better life? Visions, to provide visions, if you like, of something that's different?
I think...
you don't sit down, I'm sure, and think, okay, I'm going to write a novel today about a better life. Or do you?
No. And it can turn out to be visionary, but you don't intend it to be, of course. How can you intend
But
to
is that
be
what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
For you said you, in a way, you're trying to find the Jesus figure, the positive. Is that what you're trying to do?
Well, I also, I mean, make it a problem in a way, but yes, now I forgot what was your initial question.
It's really just about you know, creating utopias, if you like.
Yeah, no, I would never try to create a utopia in a novel. No, it's about showing what I see. I think this is what artists do, not only writers, but...
So it's describing?
Well, it's more than describing, of course. I mean, it's you in literature case, you try to do something with form and with writing and words and the way you write it and style and tone and I mean, but you show the way you see life. Yes.
But Iris Wolf was talking about the process of creativity as well, as in itself being a kind of individual utopia. Do you feel that too? That when you're writing, you're in a happy space, so to speak? Would you say that? Yes.
I do.
Do you?
Yes, I do. But why is it a happy space? That's the question. And I think it's not necessarily, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other artists, no, it doesn't have to be literature, no. It's not about the need to create necessarily. I think it is the need to just be somewhere else. Of course, they go hand in hand, but still.
But what are you touching in yourself? What are you reaching that when you're writing? That is that positive...
No, what you find important, I think, is what you touch. You find out what you find most important, what keeps your mind busy most in that period of time, maybe.
And it's also a feeling of tidying, right? After you finished a novel, it's like cleaning the house.
Yeah. This is true.
Like, ooh, you
cleaning your mind, probably. Yeah. Putting things in order. Also, this is also why you do it.
Some things become clearer.
Yeah.
So when somebody says to you, when they read your novels, they feel better as a result of reading your novel.
Nobody ever said that to me. All my books end horrible.
However, people will say, you know, having read, you know, other works of yours, people will say, I feel better because the writing was so beautiful. I mean, that in itself is a great challenge, to create beautiful writing. To put people
and as a reader, and I heard it from readers as a writer as well, I mean, you can also find consolation in sadness, in someone else's sadness, which is beautifully put down on paper. Or, I mean, because then at least you have the feeling that you're not that alone with your feeling or thought.
No, in one of the other ideas that was offered to all of us to discuss is this idea of empathy, and the idea that when we read fiction, that we are actually touching, or hoping to touch some form of empathy within ourselves, but also to appeal to readers. Do you understand that ambition, if you like? And what does empathy mean to you? Ida?
Well, I think empathy is totally needed, and it's what you do when you go into the different characters, and you also put a little bit of yourself into every character, even the ones that you really don't like, or you maybe to begin with don't understand, and you're trying to figure out throughout your novel. It's a huge, I mean, empathy is the key, right? And to also, there's no such thing as a totally good person or totally bad person. There's always a mix, and people are complicated, and empathy is requested to understand each other.
So empathy is not necessarily good and pure. It's about complexity and it's mixture. It's human life.
I think it's capacity to just put yourself in another person's shoes, and sometimes, I mean, we have this idea that our identities are rock solid. That I'm like this, I would never do that, blah blah blah. But then. Of course, we know that we are influenced by our surroundings, but I'm not sure that we know to what degree. And it's completely down to what situation you're in that decides whatever you're capable of. And I think we're capable of a lot more than we know. Until you're put in that situation and you're surprised. Oh my God, does this live in me? Or am I capable of doing this? You are.
So you do think, and back to what Iris Wolf was saying, there is also, and the previous session you were talking about the changing, fluctuating identity. Identity changes, can change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think, I once wrote an essay about empathy, also problematizing it, because, I mean, of course you need empathy, I absolutely agree, otherwise you are a psychopath and dangerous, but you can not make it mean that you put yourself in somebody else's position all the time, because you do it with your own brain, and I mean, it's not always imaginable how other people see life, and sometimes it can be a bit arrogant, I think, to, in the name of empathy, put yourself in somebody else's shoes and say, yeah, this person should do this or that. So there are troubles with empathy as well.
But that's the skill of a great novel, really, is to touch readers to the extent that they feel changed in some way by reading the novel. And you know, just to move on to talk about novels as such, because I'm absolutely fascinated by the novel today, because I think it's really an extraordinary genre, because it's changing, a bit like I did, it's changing so much. And I judge a prize for novels as well, an international literature prize. I'm seeing so many different forms of novels, and you know, they're semi-autobiographical, they're short stories, linked stories, and so on. And it's a really exciting time, I think, for the novel. And I wonder whether you both think that novels should, in some ways today, reflect what's happening in current times. I mean, should you, in that sense, be a little political? Should you always be now talking about climate change and, you know, migration, people on the move, as you do, you know, refugees? Do you feel a responsibility, Ida?
Both yes and no. But I don't think you need to have. I don't think you need to do it explicitly. I think a novel will always say something about our time, and even if it doesn't, even if it's not an explicitly political book, it will say something about society. Even though if you write about one individual living completely by himself, it will also say. I mean, his thoughts or whatever will always. Show some reflection, I suppose. But
you wouldn't start off a novel by saying, okay, I'm going to write a novel about migration, immigration.
I haven't done that so far. And I usually when I start out writing something, I'm not really sure what it's going to contain. I know some things, obviously, but I mean, the road will. How do you say, it will reveal itself as I walk.
So did this start with the woman, or did it start with the...
It started with the city, actually.
Started with the city.
Yeah. And then, and it actually contains immigration, because one of the, in Berlin, she enters an affair with another woman. although she herself is heterosexual, the other woman is lesbian, so for the other one it's just an experiment. It's an awful story, it's very dark. But anyway, this woman is from South Africa, I mean the lesbian woman living in Berlin, and she works in a shelter home, giving clothes to refugees, and so it is part of the story, as in many other stories. I mean, like you said, there's so many voices inside a novel, and the sum of it will somehow say something, maybe not very explicit, but it's there in between the lines, and I think that's important too. It's how we live.
What do you feel about that question about, to what extent should you
I think artists should be free. This is like the bottom line. But yeah, and I was a bit, I am a bit annoyed about the whole concept around socially relevant art. I had the feeling when I wrote 30 Days that it was very much framed like that, like, she's going socially irrelevant or something, because my main character is black and there are refugees. There were in previous work of mine too, but they forgot. And I don't like this framing and this labeling of literature. For me, it's just talking about, in a literary way, about everything that I think about, that comes into my life, that is part of life. I mean, migration is part of life, so of course sometimes it becomes literature, and this is for me very important, but I should be allowed next time to write a novel that takes place in one room with two people, and I mean,
or a play. I mean, whatever. Yeah, but in 100 years' time, when people are reading your novels, will they be able to place them now? Do you think? Do they very much reflect what's happening now?
Some of them, and others not. It's a big difference. But that's interesting, though, because when people read books in 100 years, which I'm not sure I have the hopes that my books will be read in 100 years, but we can. Well,
why not?
I can hope, of course. But then I think it's interesting that not my books, but books in general. If you take all the books that were published in my generation in Norway, and then you can talk about whether or not they resemble their time, and it's also true that a lot of people, they don't really care about what's going on in other places in the world, and Norway is also a little bit off the continent up there, and maybe that's why our books are not, not so political.
Maybe Norway is a happier place.
Well, statistics claim that we are, actually.
So do happy countries produce happier novels?
I don't think so. I don't. It should be like that, but it's not. So many books about lonely people.
Interestingly enough, I was in Iceland. I go to Iceland every so often, and in Iceland, every 10th person is a writer. But there's also this really interesting. There's no crime in Iceland, and so this idea of ever having crime novelists in Iceland was really interesting. But of course, there are lots of crime novelists in Iceland, so there will always be problems, however good a country is. But it is an interesting idea, I think, that if you have the basis for a good, beautiful country, like Norway. I'm not saying that Belgium isn't beautiful, but Norway is exceptionally beautiful, and you're well off. You have enough money. You have the right surroundings. Would you potentially write happier novels? Well, when you look around at your colleagues, are they writing dystopian novels?
A lot of them are. But I think, we're happy in what sense we're happy in, we live long, we have gender equality, and we have a really good welfare system and a lot of money provided for culture, I mean, it's in general very well functioning. And we have, well, in short, we have nothing to complain about, for sure. But so humans in Norway, or in Europe, in a lot of countries in Europe, are at its peak when it comes to living luxurious lives. I mean, we can sit down in our design couch having our cafe lattes.
And do you?
And no. Actually none of them, but it's this, well, you know, you can go out and have dinners in restaurants and whatnot. And then we can't really enjoy it because all this we've been working for, you know, having our hot water running in the bathroom and stuff, throughout many, many generations of industrialization and modern times. And now we're at our peak. Life is, you know, at its best, like materialistically. And then at the same time, we know that everything is falling apart. And so I don't think you can really feel happy in that.
Because you're aware of, I mean, that's because you personally are aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are. Yeah.
What about Belgium?
Well, since you talked about how will your novels be perceived in 100 years' time, recently I was rereading some Belgian and Flemish novels of around 100 years ago, and I was really struck by the fact how much nature there is in them. This is something those writers probably had no clue about, that it would be so different, because, I mean, we had no policy around nature. All the trees were cut. Everybody lives everywhere. I mean, it's not a very beautiful country in that sense. So yeah, this is, for example, a big difference. Like, wow, how much did we lose? After a couple of novels, you think, yeah, again, woods and woods and woods.
But this is actually a topic in a lot of novels, though, going back to nature. At least in Scandinavia, people moving out of the city, searching for a simpler life. You know, it's the new trend now, going backwards.
Which, in a way, makes it impossible to talk about the European novel, because there are so many different things. There are many things happening to all of us simultaneously, as I was talking about, you know, the turmoil, migration, and so on, how that's affecting us. I must say, in Great Britain, you may know there's something going on which is quite complicated and, for many of us, very negative. It's Brexit. And every time I travel, I'm always happy I'm still able to travel without Brexit, and each time, you know, there's a postponement of the vote, and the novels that are being written now in Britain are very complex. It's a very, very difficult time. People are writing Brexit novels, so they're looking at these really difficult issues. So I think it will be, in 100 years' time, I think people will look back and think, wow, that was then. I mean, very famous novelists like Ian McEwan has just written a novel called The Cockroach. And Jonathan Coe, major novelists, have been writing about this period. And I think it's really difficult to think for us of even writing about utopias at the moment. We have no idea. And our utopias are different. We're a very divided country. And I wonder whether that's another interesting thing. I mean, Belgium is in many ways divided as well, culturally, linguistically. Norway less divided. I mean, you write in Dutch, but you have several languages in Belgium.
The northern part is Flemish. Our language is Dutch. People ask me, is your language Flemish? No, Flemish is like the term for all the varieties of Dutch spoken in Flanders. It's not one language. And then the southern part is French, and there is a tiny German part also. Yeah.
But I mean, is it a divided country in that sense, or is it just...
Oh yeah, more and more. I mean, the way people vote, in Flanders, unfortunately, people vote very right or extreme right. One in two people votes like that. So,
so it's hard, isn't it, to think of writing positive novels, to creating the good life. I mean, what you're doing is really, in a way, it's like Canute. You're holding the waves back because it is such a difficult time.
Mm-hmm. But maybe it always was, in a way. I mean, there are more difficult times, this is true. But I start 30 Days with a motto by William Shakespeare of one of his sonnets, and it says, "How with this rage shall beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than a flower." So he was wondering centuries ago. Yes. And I'm at the moment reading very old stuff. And then it puts things a bit in perspective for me, and I needed that, I think, because I am worrying a lot about this day and age. But it puts things a bit in perspective in the sense that this rage, it's like a continuing process.
Would you ever think of writing non-fiction? Is it? I mean, there's one novelist I know very well called Lionel Shriver in the UK, and I interviewed her about a week ago, and she was saying at the moment that she finds it really difficult to write fiction.
Yeah, but it is a difficult time for fiction writers because, I mean, a figure like Donald Trump, for example, I mean, he's larger than life, right? I mean, if you do this in fiction, people will not believe you. And this is often a problem nowadays. I mean, you can do this in fiction and people go like, yeah, but... Or reality is more absurd, or, I mean... so yes, it is a difficult time for fiction writers. I have one book which is non-fiction, where I spend nights with people who live at night, which was nice. Nothing to do with the troubles of the world.
So is the novel for you, Ida, is it also a form of escapism?
Yes, absolutely. It's just, for me personally, I think life is kind of boring in a sense that we wake up and we are well behaved and we do pretty much what's expected of us, and we try to be good people, thankfully. And in all the both small and big situations that we interact in, it's the room for our behavior is quite narrow, and we don't really challenge it a lot. And as in fiction, you can do whatever, and that need for you can to just have the freedom to really push it, and also to put in surreal elements, or to make someone go completely insane, or to just be irrational. I think it's liberating.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, and in that sense, it is making life more clear,
yes.
I think. I mean,
it's fantastic to hear you both feel so positively about the novel, I think, and what you're doing. And it just shows me, the more I travel around, how differently we perceive, fiction at the moment. And I think what's really popular currently in the UK or English language fiction are the dystopian novels. I mean, Margaret Atwood and the extraordinary success of The Handmaid's Tale. And currently on BBC television we have His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, which was, a young girl and trying to find utopias in dystopias. And Margaret Atwood herself is a great visionary as a novelist. She was actually seeing these things, these dystopian things happening to governments and people and so on. And dystopia seems to be the name of the game. So back to this question, just to come to the end of our session really, is, what is a good life? And are you able to depict a good life? And is that what you want to continue doing in your novels? Is that what you're aiming to do? What are you working on now? Is it the good life?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's difficult.
Is it comic?
Because I think when you write, you are also on a continuous quest. I mean, you are never going to find the ultimate answer to all questions in the universe. It is, but you are on a search at least, and you want to perceive this search. This is, so, but at the moment I am working on a short story collection which could turn into a novel in stories maybe. And this is also why I mentioned reading all the old stuff, because I want every story or line to be based on a piece of literature written before the year 1900, starting in 2300 before Christ with Enheduanna, who was like the first author who signed her work of literature in Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia, that's another, again, another trend, if you like, you know, women, writing more about women, getting the forgotten stories of women.
Yeah, this is important, but it's not only women that yeah, of course, I take care to involve women as well who wrote.
It's another conscious effort in many ways, I think, that many writers are doing. What about you, Ida? What are you writing at the moment?
I just published a book in Norway. So I'm in the searching phase. I have like 3 different ideas, so I'm not really sure which one to go with. But I have been challenged by some colleagues. They're saying like, well, once in your life you have to write a book with a happy ending. So maybe the next one will be the one. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, let's hope whichever one it is that they will all be translated into English for all of us as well. So I think on that happy ending, thank you for the happy ending. And it's, as always, I've met these 2 amazing novelists before, writers before, and please read their books. Their books are on the sale out on the book table as well, and I'm sure they'll be happy to sign them. And thank you so much to Annelies Verbeke and Ida Hegazi Høyer. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.